Good day, viewers. Welcome to another edition of 30 Minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television. I'm Manir Dan Ali. My guest today is Dr. Hamid Bobboi, the Executive Secretary of the Universal Basic Education Commission, otherwise known as CBEC. That is the body in charge of education at the earlier levels of society. Doctor, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
What exactly is the current state of basic education in Nigeria? Is it on a roll or is it in decline?
Well, I can use both the two words. What I may say is it's a system that has a lot of challenges, but it's also a system that has been able to at least maintain certain basic services over the period. Don't forget that Nigeria has the largest basic education subsector in Africa. We have 45 million children in the basic education subsector.
Because of our overall total
population.
Yes.
We have about 1.4 million teachers engaged to teach our kids. And it's not an easy number, particularly to take care of based on the current reality that we live in. We have difficulties, with our revenues. We have difficulties with insurgency that has made it very difficult for many of our kids in different parts to go to school and for normal teaching learning activities to take place. And then a lot of other challenges that I think has come out of that, but at the same time, I would say that yes, some progress is made.
So to zero in on what you've just mentioned, this issue of out of school children, we see all sorts of figures being bandied. I think at one time UNICEF is mentioning 13 million. One of your report is mentioning about 10 million and what have you. What exactly is the situation now and what ages are we talking about of this out of school children?
Out of school children, the figure is it interests a lot of people. The moment you hear a figure, isn't it, you jump onto it. I remember when we did the 2018 National Personnel Audit, the school census, we came up with 10.2 million. Those numbers who are out of school between the ages of 6 and 11. Why do we concentrate on this particular figure? We do for the simple fact that it's the gateway, the access point that a lot of if a child doesn't go through that and survive within that particular system, it's difficult for that child also to do the other stages that we are talking about.
And your own remit actually is basic education up to junior secondary school.
Up to junior secondary school at the moment. And I think as far as out of school children are concerned, at that time we said we had 10.2 million for the 6 to 11-year-olds. And then 6.3 million for the junior secondary school. But these are secondary figures that are there. And I think what usually happens is that people confuse the age groups that you are talking about. You just come and say, you hear a figure has gone up. Of recent, there has been a lot of talk about the 20 million out of school children, as if now the figure has increased from 10.2 million to 20 million.
But has it not increased? I mean, you've just said that there's the insurgency which has forced some children to be
interestingly, there has been the insurgency. Insurgency is a reality in a lot of parts. We went through this in 2014 with the Boko Haram in Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa. And it displays a large number of children. And that's when we started having the 13 million children out of school. But 13 million, that even those people who put that particular figure are talking of 6 to 15 years
I
of
think
age.
that figure you are talking about is of UNICEF or
Well,
UNESCO.
it was UNICEF that was
That's the
actually
United
putting that figure.
Nations Children
But
Fund.
at that time, in 2014, it was a realistic figure. It was a realistic figure because children in most parts of Borno and Yobe were not going to school. But this problem was addressed, and at the end of the day, a lot of those children went back to school, and the figure went down. So by the time we came in, we did that audit in 2018. The figure was 10.2, and we published that particular figure. But don't forget that basic education also includes junior secondary schools. And for the figure of junior secondary school, we had 6.2 million. And we publish it. Now, looking at what is being discussed about now about out-of-school children, the interesting fact is that UNESCO is adding another component that was not part of the original component. And that component is the senior secondary school.
You are talking of the United Nations Educational and Scientific
and Cultural Organization.
Cultural Organization.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. They did the education, isn't it, the Global Education Monitoring Report, and then came up with a figure of 20 million for Nigeria.
That is of out-of-school children.
Of out-of-school children, but what groups are they talking about?
Did they state the ages, age range? Does it, conform with
their
own numbers?
They stated these ages very clearly. They are talking of 6 to 18 years.
Up to 18, which
to
is
18.
up to people who have completed senior secondary school.
Beyond senior secondary school, because people usually finish senior secondary school at the age of 17. So people have to understand those categorizations. Nothing has changed in terms of the numbers that we have. In fact, going by the UNESCO figures of 2022, our figure, UNESCO is giving a much lower figure for Nigeria for the 6 to 11 year, age group. It has gone down, Nigeria's, figure for that particular age group of 6 to 11 has gone down from our 10.2 to 9.5. That's the UNESCO 2022 figure.
But Doctor, in spite of probably some of the figures going down, we are still talking of a lot of millions.
There are a lot of millions.
Isn't it worrying that these millions of children are out of school?
It's very worrying. It's very worrying, and that's the reason why we spend a lot of time and resources to track these things, to ensure that we can work with the state governments to address this particular problem.
You've touched on one of the complications. I mean, being a federal state in Nigeria, it means federal government is limited in terms of basic education is supposed to be catered for by the state and local authorities.
That's the constitutional provision that, where you have primary education, isn't it, under the responsibility of local government. Junior secondary schools and senior secondary schools under the responsibility of the state. And UBEC was established, and don't forget, it was established specifically to see how does it support states to address this particular issue.
To just support the states.
To support the states in terms
you don't have schools of your own.
We don't have a single, UBEC doesn't have a school. UBEC doesn't employ any teacher. So the whole idea is how do you support states to function better? How do you get states to work, isn't it, in a coordinated manner? To, with the kind of policies that can make that difference that is required to solve this particular problem.
Is that work easy or complicated?
It's a very complicated, it's a very complicated job, isn't it? But it is a job that has to be done, because unless and until we can provide our children, beginning from an early age, that opportunity to begin to learn how to learn, and subsequently go into primary schools to learn. And at the end of the day, isn't it, go into junior secondary schools. And now we have a bigger challenge that basic education does not end at the level of junior secondary school. Basic education ends at senior secondary school, and that's the SDGs that we have signed. So the issue is we have a greater job, a bigger job, much more difficult job to ensure that our children can transit from junior secondary school. And fortunately, for the last few years, isn't it, based even on the UNESCO figures, these figures have been very stable. We have been able, through the government interventions and so on and so on, despite the fact that the birth rates, isn't it, kept on increasing. By the time you make whatever arrangements, isn't it, we can, I think in the last 3 years, say that we are pumped in getting about 5 million kids accommodated 5 million kids into the system, but yet the birth rate has also, the number of kids that are also coming into school.
And then there's this SDGs, that's the Sustainable Development Goal that you signed.
Yeah, exactly.
Why sign something which may be difficult for you? Because you haven't managed to deal with even the one that stopped at JSS, that's junior secondary school. You've added the senior secondary school.
But don't forget that initially it was primary education which was the major focus. The world is moving,
right,
and moving, making progress. We started where going to primary school was the key element, isn't it? From there we said, no, just going to primary school alone in the 21st century cannot help you. Please, let's make, and that's how UBEC was created, isn't it? To say that let's have basic education. Basic education ends at junior secondary school. But somehow, I think the world is moving again, isn't it? We come to a point where we say, well, no, junior secondary school is not enough. And in the 21st century, skills that you require, we have to move to, isn't it, a much more ambitious goal of ensuring that basic education ends at senior.
Is it because the quality is falling? That is why you keep jacking up the levels?
No, it's not. It's an international response. Internationally, the feeling that, isn't it, as more children are coming into this system, as more challenges, isn't it, that society is getting more complex, for somebody to effectively participate in the current global economy, the minimum you need, isn't it, should be senior secondary school, not junior secondary school. But the problem is that, you see, as these things are coming, we are trying to sort out all our unresolved problems.
Like the tons of out of school children. What are you doing about them?
Yeah, again, a lot of activities. And that's the reason why, as I said to you, going by the UNESCO figures, isn't it, Nigeria, in fact, the 10.2 million, isn't it, that we are talking about in 2018, UNESCO is giving us a new figure in 2022 of 9.5 million. So at least something is going on that has been able to at least bring in. And part of this has been, the different levels of intervention that the government has put in the area of advocacy, in the area of the better education service delivery for all that has targeted out-of-school children with the support of the World Bank. It has brought in, again, quite a large number of children. The reviewed Al-Majri program that we have also been handling, isn't it, for the last few years, after the failure of the mega schools, that were built, isn't it, in the last 5 years. Now needs to see how do you work with the proprietors of these Al-Majri schools, help them to integrate, because the integration aspect is very important. And at the end of the day, provide certain basic facilities, instructional materials, training, to ensure that they can, yes, teach the Islamia school subjects, but as well as the conventional school subjects.
We'll continue with this very interesting conversation after a short break.
Thank you.
Viewers, it is 30 minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television. Our guest today is Dr. Hamid Bobboi, the Executive Secretary of UBEC, that is the Universal Basic Education Commission. Welcome back. It is still 30 minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television. And our guest today is Dr. Hamid Bobboi, the Executive Secretary of UBEC, the Universal Basic Education Commission. Doctor, before we went on break, you were on a roll. You were telling us about the failure of the Al-Majri school system, the one under the Jonathan administration. Why did it fail after guzzling billions to build these schools in so many states, and then it all came to almost nothing?
Yeah, I think we need to, again, retrace our steps and go back and understand what happened. When President Umaru Yar'Adua came in power, I think that's when the program started. But within it didn't get traction. And by the time he died, that's when President Jonathan took over. And I think he came forcefully to say, okay, let's continue this particular program.
And spend all the billions to build these schools.
Initially the way it started, was it started with ETF, the current debt fund.
Yes,
where it began in 2003, where the whole idea was to see how do we support states. And I was at Arewa House at that time as director. And I remember ETF approached us. What can you help us in designing some program that can help begin to address this particular problem? We said the best thing would be working with the states, understanding how do you now get the states to begin to provide basic infrastructure to these schools. Interestingly, for the out-of-school children category, you come to find that 23% of those who do not attend the conventional schools are attending the
Islamic
alone
only.
So they themselves, we are talking of the number of out-of-school children, those that are not in the conventional school, is about 23%.
So it's a big chunk.
It's a big chunk
that ought to be addressed.
That we have to address.
Right. So, and then, but it was addressed wrongly. Contracts, big buildings,
I don't know.
That.
It may not have been the motivation. It may not have been the motivation because I knew what happened, isn't it? Through that entire period. The idea was to build models that state governments now can adopt and have, and these are wonderful models because in part of that particular design, you have a school with boarding facilities, a school with language labs where children can now learn both Arabic and English and can practice the language, can learn how to speak.
So is it the state that dropped the ball, which made it impossible for the model to work?
You know that I'm not in that game of how do you of trading blames, who did what and so on. But the system.
But the fact remains that it didn't work.
The system
it's not working.
could not develop that synergy and the understanding. And I think some of it, again, is largely about issue of resources. A lot of the state governments will tell you we cannot afford boarding. We have so many boarding schools that we are suffering, and you cannot come and tell us to do this boarding, do that boarding.
So that
the second aspect is that a lot of them, again, maybe even the concept. All what we are, we have been raised with is that you have both for Arabic and Islamic studies, and you have Arabic schools, and then you have another section, the conventional school. They never mix. The idea here is to bring them together. I think a lot of states have some problems.
So it appears that your suggestion, your advice for that consultation with the state didn't work. If the states are saying we can't afford boarding, we can't do this and all of that, it means there was no clarity in...
No, there was clarity. There was even an understanding with people. Isn't it? A meeting that was held. I remember, isn't it? All the governors came and everybody agreed and so on and so forth. But don't forget that by the time the schools were to take off,
there was a change of administration.
Again, change of administration, and a lot of the new governors who are coming in, isn't it? Had no idea, isn't it? What actually had transpired. But the issue is to understand that to move forward, because the private sector had been doing that. The private sector had been having these integrated schools. And they have worked so well.
So how do we move on? How do we make progress? Because the problem is still there, unaddressed.
It's been addressed, but perhaps not sufficiently to make sure that we can take that category and say that yes, it has succeeded. But at the moment, our focus is working with the proprietors, not with governments. Because we find that
you want to work with the private sector.
With the private, I don't.
Head of the schools, the Almajiri schools.
Because there are a lot of proprietors that are struggling, isn't it? And I think the whole idea is to see how do you link up, because a lot of them understand these issues very well. They articulate, they understand the problems, they understand it with some support, isn't it? You come to find that they quickly pick up, and the communities support them, mobilize to get the resources, and you have integrated schools.
Let's move on, because you touched on states complaining of lack of resources. Yet, at one point, you said there was about 70 billion naira of federal government funds to support states in education that these states are not accessing. I know the figures are going down. What is the situation now, and is the matching grant, I mean, are the states accessing them? Are they more ready to take this help from federal government?
No, the states have been. I think in the last 2 years, there has been a lot of progress. You know, sometimes figures stick in people's minds.
Yes.
Maybe there was a time when you had 70 billion. It will take you about 3 years to change that idea that it's no longer 70 billion.
How much is it now?
Now it's about 20. The last count was about 23 billion. That is still outstanding, which is a much lower figure.
And which states are the culprits?
I don't want to use the word culprit in that regard.
Well, who are not accessing it? Who are not accessing this fund?
But
free money, and they don't want to take it.
Well, it's not free, because
Yeah, you have to give the counterpart.
You have to bring whatever amount, isn't it? That is there. So that we can match it. That's why it's called a matching grant.
Right.
I think largely the major problem has been in the southeast. And is there
which may be surprising.
Yeah, it's surprising. It's surprising because, again, I don't know, isn't it?
You haven't done enough advocacy there, or why?
No, there is sufficient. There's sufficient advocacy. There was a time, in around 2018, 2019, a lot of the states had the Paris Club refund, and those who had not paid, who have not been paying their counterpart funding, now had that money deducted from their Paris Club refund and given to UBEC, and ultimately UBEC match it and pass it on to them. So a lot of them ended up with quite
tidy sums.
Exactly tidy sums that they have been able now to, trying to see, isn't it, how they could really implement, isn't it, their own projects. And I think the same thing also happened. There are some states that had 7 billion, some had 9 billion. A state like Ogun, I think, had getting to about 13 billion or so, isn't it? So it's not easy because, again, there are regulations of utilizing this money and so on and so forth, the procurement process, and a lot of these things. But a lot of them now have completed those projects that they've got monies from the Paris Club refund and are able to come back and say that, including all those, many of those states, so the figure is very low now.
But at another time, you are also saying that up to 57 or so % of primary school teachers are unqualified. What's the situation now?
The situation has not changed, unfortunately. It has not
Still
changed.
the same.
In fact, during the COVID period, isn't it? You find even a much more serious problem where teachers have been retiring, and the states were not even in a position to recruit. So the number of teachers has been decreasing. The qualified, unqualified ratios have not improved. Unfortunately, again, a large number of our private schools, isn't it, have employed quite a large number of teachers during that period. While public schools are losing teachers, private schools have been employing teachers.
Yeah.
Perhaps taking from those who are retiring from the.
Is it because of higher pay or what?
They are not necessarily paying much higher, isn't it? There are some that are paying higher, but not all of them. In fact, in terms of even qualification of teachers, quite interestingly, during the last 3 years, the number of those teachers who are qualified, engaged by these private schools, went down by about 4. I think the number that are unqualified within the system is over 45%. Unqualified without the teaching qualification. So the issue with that is about management. And I've always said that the teacher, the private schools have been able, of course, through coercive means sometimes, and sometimes through cajoling, sometimes again through a reward system that the teachers find, isn't it? But they were productive, much more productive, perhaps, than some of those teachers, isn't it? That are left fallow.
But why is this the situation? 57% unqualified teachers. Is it because your interventions and the state governments are focusing more on building classrooms rather than the human capacity of the teachers.
No, Munir. Now, if you look at it, then you come to find that UPEC is not involved in engaging teachers. Teachers are employed by states.
No, what I mean is these funds that you have that you are giving to the states, probably they are for building classrooms and equipping them, and not for helping raise the quality of the teachers.
No, the quality of teachers, 10% of the amount given to, the 50% matching grant is for infrastructure and related aspects. But don't forget that there are other amounts that are there. 10% of the amount, that comes as part of the intervention goes for teacher professional development. So this is given, isn't it, But the states need to supplement these funds. In most states, the state does not spend a single kobo on teacher professional development besides what the federal government provides. Now, instructional materials are also provided. 15% of the amount goes for instructional materials. Most states, I think few states are adding anything in terms of purchasing instructional materials that can support teaching and learning within the schools at the state level.
Do you subscribe to the idea that maybe basic education is much more important, much more fundamental than the tertiary education that we appear to be paying more attention to, university, polytechnics, and what have you? Now, even the Nigerian legislators want to have a university in almost every constituency. Is that a misplacement of priority?
No, you see, the system is a dynamic system. Instead of talking about, we are talking of the vitality that is required for each and every sector to function so that we can have the overall development of the system itself. It's like a train.
Right.
It's difficult to say now, isn't it, yes, you need the engine which is there, isn't it, which is the government that has to move it, isn't it, But maybe the initial coaches that are there, isn't it, are the primary, secondary that, isn't it, have to link up with the other ones, isn't it, as you are moving. We need to have a sound basic education system because that's the foundation. When we miss it, and that's why we have been focusing specifically to look at those figures and following those figures at the level of the 6 to 11, and to some extent, isn't it,
up to the 18 years that
up to the 14 years, because these are the foundational years that we need to make sure. But we can't neglect senior secondary schools. And it's from senior secondary schools, these children go into the universities. And at the end of the day, isn't it, we need to look at it rather than, instead of saying this is more important. No, it's a system. It's a holistic system.
Each part has its own role,
isn't it? But the basic education sector plays a crucial role in that system.
Thank you very much.
Building and seeing that we have a robust system.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hamid Bobboi, for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
Viewers, we've come to the end of this edition of 30 Minutes. Keep a date with us.